Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Board Games, where we pretty much just talk about some of the games that we've been playing. And since this is our first episode of the year, we figured we'll talk about some of the games that we played over the holidays.
Yes, we had a family staying with us for a couple weeks. We also visited my brother out of town, and we played some of these games with them. So we are going to be talking about 5 different games that we played over the past couple weeks. These all came to us as review copies, so just be aware of that ahead of time. And I'm ready to get into it if you are.
Yes, go for it.
Okay, the very first game that we're going to talk about came to us from Randolph Games, and it is designed by Vincent Berger, and it's called CDSK.
Yes.
Now, CDSK is a trivia-based game, so it's a little hoot for the family. And essentially what you have here is you have a board with a bunch of different kind of categories where you're going to have your pawn piece starting at the starting line, and you're going to have to try to answer various different questions to try to make it to the end game.
Yes, this is a trivia game through and through, and it is called CDSK because the different letters represent different categories of questions. Now, one thing though, the game does not come with pawns, so that's sort of part of the kooky thing about it. You can choose whatever pawn you would like to represent you, but yes, it is a board where the main goal is to try to get to the very end of the line. And the way that the game works is on your turn, you're going to answer a question based off of the spot that your pawn is on at the start of your turn. So if you are on a C space, then I believe the category is curious.
Yes.
And if you're curious, the rest of them are D, delightful, S for seasoned, and K for knowledge.
Right.
And those categories are supposed to represent different things.
Yeah, so like D discovery, or sorry, D delightful is
Yes.
movies, music, and sports. That's kind of the category. Knowledge would be science, nature, history, and geography.
Right,
Those kind of questions. So you kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you land on a particular spot.
Yes, but each card has 10 questions on it because you're always going to start, whoever's reading the question is always going to start by asking, Naveen, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you know blank? Where blank is the subject of all of these questions. You're going to provide a number based off of how strong your expertise is in that subject. And then the questions are rated by difficulty depending on the number that you choose. So if you choose 10, you're going to be given the most difficult question, the most randomly difficult question that somebody could probably think of for this subject.
Sure.
And if you choose 1, it's going to be something really easy that you're definitely going to get that answer right.
It's
just
like,
sort of helps
how
you move
well
along.
do you know dogs? Well, I'm going to say 1. Dogs have a tendency to meow, bark, or
Squeak.
or squeak. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And then you'd be like, oh, okay, I got
Yeah.
that one.
Now, if your answer was correct, then you get to move up the number of spaces equal to that number. And so it's high risk, high reward. So if you guessed on a 10 and you were correct, then you get to move up a lot of spaces. But if you were incorrect, you don't lose anything. You just stay on the same space and you'll have to try again with the same category of question on your next turn.
Yeah, and so as you see, the whole board is laid out for you. So if you're like, well, I know a lot about dogs, but I don't want to take a risk and go 7 because 7 is going to land me on music and movies. And I don't
Yeah.
know too much about movies. So maybe I'll say a 6 instead so I can land on a category that I know a little bit more comfortable about so that I can advance most likely quicker on my very next turn.
And the other way is true too. If you're stuck on a category that you're just really terrible at, then you can always just choose 1. You're going to get the answer correct, chances are.
Probably.
And you'll progress at least 1 space. So that is the game in a nutshell. Now, there are other spaces also that I forgot what they're called now, but there are these ticketed spaces that work a little bit differently. Typically, you're given a prompt and you have to provide several answers. And for every answer that you get correct, you progress 1 space on the track. And if you reach the very last space, by the way, then you have to answer 1 final question, which is its own category of cards.
It's like the boss question.
Yes, it's a boss question. It's usually really difficult, but if you can answer that, then you win. And so the game actually has 2 lengths of play. You can do the full game, which is the entire board, or you can start on the express start, which is about halfway through. And you can also play it in teams. But that is essentially CDSK in a nutshell. Naveen, what are your thoughts?
I like it. I like trivia. I like trivia games. You know, like when you're a kid and they had that little like thing in the little screen in
Little
like
screen.
restaurants and stuff, and they had a little trivia on there. Did you ever
I
have
don't
that?
think no, is that something called
Some
Winnie
people
thing?
may know this, but like at pizza places and stuff like that, we used to love playing on that, like while you're just kind of waiting for your pizza.
Oh.
Anyway, this is a trivia game, and I do enjoy trivia games. Now,
Yeah.
the question obviously is going to be replayability, but what is pretty nice is because of the way the game is set up, there is that 1 through 10. So each question or each category, there's technically 10 different questions. So yes, you might see the same ones over and over, but if you say 3 on it the first time you get it, and then maybe you go for a 5 or a 6 the next time, then, it's going to be a completely different prompt. So, we've played it several times, and each time we've played it, I haven't really like found myself catching the exact same questions, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And it seemed like your family was having a good time with it. My brother had a good time with it.
This was a hit with our families, and I will say I enjoy trivia games, but I am awful at them. So I always kind of try to trying them, and then I always crash and burn. This one was no exception, but I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I like this one so much because it is so funny. Like, you're given a topic and you have no idea what's going to be coming at you until they read the question or they read the card, and it's like, Naveen, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you know Barbie?
Barbie. Ooh, I was
just
like,
random stuff. And you're always thinking like, well, maybe this is my chance to get ahead.
Yeah.
And then you're given the prompt and you have to admit that you have no idea.
Sometimes you know a category and it's like, oh, I'm going to go for an 8 or 9. You're
Yeah.
like, I didn't know that about that category.
Yeah.
So it's
really
fun.
funny.
We had a good time with it. I will say the long game, the couple times that we played it, we did get a little bit tripped up by being a little too confident, and sometimes you can be held back and you're not getting off that starting block. So if you want to just have a nice, quick, fun in and out experience, the Express game gives you basically everything that you're looking for in the game, if you wanted to play it quickly and then move on to something else.
So that's also going to be very dependent. We played this game at lower player counts, and in higher player counts you can play in teams. So I don't know how that will impact how quickly you progress up this board, but it's really going to be dependent on how people answer. Because if people are choosing a 10 or a 7 through 10 and they're getting those questions correct, then they're going. The game's going to be much faster. Now, I also don't know how this is going to impact your experience depending on where you are. Just because of some of the cultural-based things in popular culture that'll arise. But a strong majority of the questions, I feel like, are more general.
Also, there's some questions that will be, I think, relevant in a particular time era. Like, so one of the prompts is, and it's not really a spoiler, but it's the salaries of current NBA players, like the top salaries.
Yes.
So it's like, I don't know if you pull this off your shelf 10 years from now,
if that's still going to be a,
it's going to be, so that might be something. So, but for the most part, we found that the questions are going to be fairly self-contained.
Yeah, they're very fair.
Yeah.
And I will echo what Naveen said. We played this game at 4, the full game, and it did feel kind of long.
A little long, yeah.
But the express start for smaller player counts is great. So anyway, that is CDSK. It was a big hit in both of our families.
It was.
All right, next up we have a small card game, and this is actually part of a series of games. It is called Similo. So this was published by Horrible Guild, and there are a bunch of different themes for this specific game. This one happens to be myths, so think like Greek gods.
Greek mythology,
stuff like that. And if you've never played this game before, it is very simple and very fast. So you have a deck of cards that all have different faces, typically, of different characters, depending on the theme. It's a fully cooperative game where one person is trying to guide the rest of the group to try to figure out the one character that they chose at the beginning of the game during setup out of the entire deck. And so you're going to have a grid of cards that includes that one character that the rest of the group is trying to narrow it down to. And so each round, the clue giver will play a card from their hand to try to lead them to that card, depending on the orientation that they play the clue in. So if they position it vertically, then they're saying that the card has a similarity.
There's similar characteristics of the card you just played to what you're trying to guide the group towards.
Yes, and if they position it horizontally, then it's something is different, right? And that is entirely subjective. That's the entire point of the game.
The whole game is subjective,
Yeah, the thing is, these characters are all adorned in different things depending on the character. They also have a background color. So there's a lot of different aspects that you can be taking into consideration if you're the clue giver.
Yeah, it might be something like, okay, similar. It's like, okay, well, all these characters are wearing hats. This character has a hat. So is she saying that all people with hats I want to guess towards? So maybe I'll eliminate all the people not wearing a hat or something like that.
Because each round, the rest of the group has to eliminate a certain number of cards that they think the character is not. And that's going to be equal to whatever round you're in. So in the first round, it's pretty low stakes. You just remove one card. The second round, you remove 2. And you pretty much keep going until it's a 50-50 in the final round, where you'll have to guess which one it is between the two.
Yeah, the good thing is as long as you don't eliminate the wrong card, the one, kind of death card, then, the clue giver is kind of giving you a story because you can still look back on the similarities and differences from the previous rounds.
Yes.
So you can see like, well, okay, there's a hat there, and okay, she said she diagonaled or horizontal on a female, so maybe it's a male character.
Right.
And so you're kind of just like slowly just trying to pick away at the cards.
For good or for bad,
good or
by
for
the way,
bad, yeah.
because the clue giver only has a few options in their hand. It's just like any other game where there's a clue giver and they're limited by their hand.
Exactly.
You have to choose between one of those, right?
Yeah, sometimes you're going to find yourself like the background color. Hopefully they understand that the background color is what I'm trying to say.
Or the one thing on their hat.
Oh, like,
the
oh,
feather.
you didn't see there's a feather. Yeah, or a little crown jewel.
Or whatever reason you make.
Yeah.
So if ever the group removes the card, obviously, then they lose the game immediately.
Yeah.
So that is pretty much how all of the Similo games play. It's really quick, and I actually really, really like this system.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, we did struggle a little bit with this deck in particular because of its theme. So I would probably suggest choosing a deck that you resonate with because it'll make the game easier to play. But otherwise, the game is really quick. It plays in like 10 minutes, and you can pretty much play it with all ages, I think. I mean, the box says 7 and up, but it's just similarities and differences.
Yeah, you just point out the differences.
Yeah.
Point out the similarities, right? Similo. So this game, what you can do, which is interesting, is you can mix and match the decks. So you can have one theme that's laid out as the display and a completely different themed deck as the cards that the clue giver is going to be using. So it can kind of create different combinations and mechanics. So that is Similo Myths. There you go.
All right, next up we have a game from All Play. This is a 2-player only trick-taking game. So we played this game together. We did not play this one with our families.
We're family.
And it is called Sail. That's true. In this game, we are working together. It's fully cooperative, and we're working together to try to sail our boat to a certain destination on a map. But it is a trick-taking game. So you're doing this with cards from your hand. The way that the game works is it is a standard trick-taking game in the way that you play your cards. Each round, one player is going to lead a trick by playing a card from their hand, and then the other player has to follow suit if they have it. And whoever plays the higher valued card wins the trick.
Yep.
But the point in this game is not really to win tricks like in other standard trick-taking games. The point is the cards all have symbols on them, and you're trying to match them together because there's a handy dandy guide that tells you what combinations of symbols will allow you to do what. And so, for example, if the 2 cards that you played had steering wheels on them, then that combination will allow you to move your boat towards the player who won the trick. So they're going to have to move, the boat's going to have to move in a diagonal fashion. Now, there are roadblocks on the map. They're just areas that you can't go through or areas that will force you to take damage. And there are also some symbol combinations that will require you to take damage by the Kraken.
Yeah, the ultimate goal of the game is for every scenario, your sailboat that you're sailing, hence the name Sail, starts at one end of kind of this map, and you're trying to sail it and navigate around various Krakens, mountainous regions, and it's kind of like in a checkerboard Argyle-like style. The reason why you would maybe want to throw a trick is because it's like, hey, we can't move. I can't win this trick and use the move action because that means the boat's going to gravitate towards me, which is right next to the Kraken, which is going to cause damage to us. So I need to throw it, and then you have to win this trick so that we can kind of move it in the diagonal towards you. And so all the while, we're trying to kind of weave around these different things to get to the final end destination.
Yes. Now, there is a time limit. So some of the scenarios have these storm clouds that you have to at least reach by a certain round. And there's also a certain time limit for the entire game. So it's quite difficult.
It is,
I think it was a really, really interesting spin on trick-taking because you are thinking in a trick-taking fashion, but the point of the game is not the actual trick-taking card game. It's so that you can sail this boat and try to match those symbols.
Yeah, this game also has that element of at the beginning of every round, you're allowed to pass one card to your teammate. And that one card, if you know you're trick-taking, that pass is very crucial in communicating so many things. If I'm passing you maybe a 9 with a certain symbol, then you should probably be aware of what that means when you look at the menu of the different combinations of the different symbols that you can kind of put together. You're saying, wait, does that mean you have no more and you want me to take control of the suit? Or, oh, maybe you want us to match these 2 pairs and play it at the right time. But because it's a trick-taking game, sometimes it doesn't all come together because you have to follow suit.
Yes.
So that's where things can fall apart for you.
So that is why the combination of these 2 large pieces of the game fit in really interestingly. The fact that you're just trying to combine symbols and move the boat, but also you're playing this trick-taking game. So it requires you to count suits to make sure that, because there's a guide that tells you all the numbers and what the symbols are on the numbers, and all of the cards are unique. So you can sort of card count and play your tricks so that you are giving the other player the opportunity to play the card that you really want to combine with, if that makes sense.
And then there's also a mechanism where there's a Kraken that has their own deck, and if you bleed that deck out and you have to reshuffle it and there's no more cards to be reshuffled, then the Kraken has basically got you and sunk your ship.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting. There are, I believe, 6 scenarios in
So
the
there's
intro.
an intro scenario and 5 regular base scenarios in the base game. And so that can be expanded with the Seafarers expansion, I think it's called, that adds an additional 6 scenarios.
Yeah, that initial starting scenario is very useful. I know sometimes when we get a game, we're like, let's just jump right into the first one. It was actually very helpful to play the intro scenario to really understand so if we put these 2 cards together, yes, we move the boat, but we also take a damage, and those are like those little intricacies that you should be aware of when you go into it. So
it's tough. It's
really
a hard
tough,
game. It really forces you to work together.
It feels good when you win, though.
It does.
When you get to the end, you're like,
and you really do feel like you're sailing this. It's going to sound ridiculous because this is a trick-taking game. But halfway through the first time we were playing, I was thinking, this really feels like we're navigating this boat. Because you're card counting and you're trying to figure out which cards to play so that your opponent or your teammate has the opportunity to play the ideal card as well.
One last big caveat that we didn't mention is everybody has an asymmetric power at the beginning.
Yes, that's right.
And so there was times in our plays where it's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to use this asymmetric power, but then you get to the final 3 and you see 3 cards in each person's hand, and I'm like, wait, if we play the right combination of cards, I can play my asymmetric power finally. And that is very, very satisfying when you get to do that.
Yes, because just right off the gate, I guess, the powers are not super useful. But if you can time them at the right time, they can really save you.
Yeah.
So anyway, I loved it. I thought that this was a really, really interesting take on trick-taking. Very, very refreshing, really unique design, and the artwork is fantastic. So that is Sail.
The 4th game we want to talk about comes from Ravensburger, and it is a push your luck style game called Push. Now, Push is comprised of a deck of cards that are valued from 1 through 6 and have various colors on them. I believe it's one of 5 different colors. And so basically on your turn, you're going to be drawing a card and playing that card to one of 3 different stacks.
Yes, the deck is going to be face down, and no matter what the player count is, it's always going to be up to 3 stacks that you're making on your turn. And the rules are you can only add a card to a stack if the same number or the same color doesn't already exist in that stack. And so the whole purpose of this is at some point, you'll decide to stop adding cards. And at that point, everybody around the table can take turns taking an entire stack. So if you're playing with more than 3 players, then people are not going to be able to take a stack during that turn.
Yeah, because you get first dibs. If you're the one that's drawing and placing it out, you get to say, I'm going to take this particular stack.
Yes, but if you ever draw a card because you keep pushing your luck by drawing more cards that you cannot place in any of the 3 stacks, then you bust, and you do not get to claim any of these stacks, but everybody else around the table still does. Now, there are a couple of other cards that do certain things. I believe there's a card that reverses the order of taking stacks. Never the order of play, but it's just the order of that you get to actually take the stack. And another one that allows you to roll the die. Now, the thing is, when you claim your stack, you're going to put it in front of you in sort of like your score pile, and you're going to categorize each number by their color. But these stacks are not safe. And so if you ever take a stack that has the die card on it, you're going to be required to roll the die. And whatever color you roll, you have to discard all cards of that color that are in front of you.
It's not good.
It's not good because that is your score pile, essentially. Now, if ever you want to save, if you have a really valuable stack of cards and you want to save it so that there's no risk of it getting removed, then on your turn, instead of taking a turn where you draw cards from the deck, you can choose to choose one color and put it in your safe pile. And so you'll never be forced to discard cards from that pile.
Yeah, so if let's say your red pile has a 6, a bunch of 5s, and a 4, you're going to be like, I don't want to take any more chances. I think I'm just going to waste my entire, not waste your turn, but waste your turn and save those reds from any potential negative down in the future.
Which makes for interesting decisions because as the person whose turn it is, you are trying to sort of balance between continue to push your luck and continuing to play cards, but also creating stacks that are really, really good for you because you'll get to choose a stack first, but also really not that great for the other players who will get to pick a stack.
Yeah, so like if you draw that die, you want to put it on the 2 stacks that you know you're not really gunning for, the ones that you don't really want, because you want to leave that for your opponents so that they have to roll the die when they take it.
It is pure push your luck. This is one of those straight mechanisms kind of games, no real bells or whistles or anything like that.
Yeah, down to the die roll. Even the die roll is technically you're pushing your luck.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, I just need this to not roll a purple. Sure enough, it rolls a purple. You know, so
Yes.
you know, it's fine. It's a fine game. Push your luck is not really one that that I enjoy too much.
We don't gravitate towards push
Yeah.
your luck games. We've covered a few of them on our channel in the past, but we've always sort of just that specific mechanism of pushing your luck has never really sealed the deal for us.
Yeah, it's not one that that I felt after we played it. It was like, ooh, I'd love to play that again sometime.
But we always try. We'll always try new push your luck games because
Sure.
there's always exceptions to these things,
yeah.
And so I felt like we played this with my sister, and I felt like around the table I was the one who enjoyed it the most.
Your sister was having very bad luck with the dice.
She was.
Like it would be like, doesn't have 3 of the colors, just needs yellow not to roll.
Yeah.
Yellow rolls.
Yellow rolls.
Builds up green, needs green not to roll, green rolls.
Yeah.
And it was like, ooh,
She was pretty much just accumulating
Yeah.
cards to discard them.
to just discard them. It happened like multiple times.
Not
yeah.
a good position for her.
Yeah.
But I think it would probably play better at more than 3 players just because the reverse card would probably be more beneficial if there are players who are at risk of not being able to take a stack.
That's true. Yeah.
So in a 3-player game, we're pretty much just rotating in a triangle.
Or
who is going to get to take the
if
next
you see a
stack?
die, one of those die cards on there that forces you to roll the die, you're like, man, I really hope this reverses because I do not want to take that. I
Yeah.
don't want to take the chance.
That's
All
true.
my cards that I want to save are valuable to me. So yeah, it's okay. That is push.
Yes, bare bones, push your luck. And finally, the last game that we're going to be talking about today is a card game for 2 to 5 players, and it is called Forest Shuffle. This is brought to us by Lookout Games, and this game came highly recommended by a lot of different people. So over the holidays, we decided, let's just play it. It's a card game.
We've had it,
Right.
and we're like, it's time to finally play this thing.
Now, if you've never played this game before, in this game, players are competing to grow out their own forest that is complete with trees and animals and fungi and all sorts of different things.
Birds and bats.
Yes, and it's one of those games where the cards they're not multi-use, they're multi-option cards
Yeah.
that sort of synergize with each other. It's one of those games where you're basically playing cards into your forest that have scoring conditions and then trying to meet those scoring conditions over and over again. So the way the game works is each player has a hand of cards, and on your turn, you either draw 2 cards or you play a card into your forest. Now, the first card that you play into your forest has to be a tree card because these animals and all the other types of cards can only exist if you have at least one tree in your forest.
All other cards basically gravitate around the tree.
Now, when playing any kinds of cards into your forest, each card has a cost that you have to pay via cards that are in your hand. So you're trying to manage your hand in terms of what you actually want to play and keep and what you are okay with discarding.
Yeah, all cards are technically valuable in that sense that because they become your currency to play the cards that you truly want to put into play.
Yes, and when you discard cards, they get discarded face up into a clearing. So when somebody else around the table takes a turn that allows them to draw 2 cards, they can draw from that clearing. So you also have to be cautious about what you're discarding because you're giving it to other players. Now, as for the non-tree cards, all other cards have several options. They're either going to be split horizontally or vertically along the card. And so if a card is split horizontally, that means you can only play it above or below your tree.
Yep.
And so basically each tree has the capacity to hold up to 4 cards, one on each of its sides. And you can also have multiple trees in your forest. So you don't have to completely build out
Should
one
definitely have
tree.
multiple trees in your forest.
Yes, because they all score in different ways. But you do not have to build out all of the 4 sides of a tree before placing a new one.
Before moving on, right.
Now, some cards have immediate effects that you can take when played into your forest. Some cards also provide a bonus if you are able to pay for its cost using only one specific color of card, and it'll state on the card what that color is. But that is the game in a nutshell. You're pretty much just building out your forest and trying to meet all of the scoring criteria, because each card will typically tell you the way that it scores. Some will just give you a certain number of points, and some will give you points depending on what other cards are in your forest.
Yeah, some might be like, if you have a bat in the upper portion of this tree, then this card will score you 15 points.
Right.
So you're like, okay, so Monique knows I have that card in my tree, so she's not discarding bats that can go in the top side of a tree. So I got to go find that. I got to go dig through the deck and look for that. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to pivot because it's never coming.
Yes, this is actually exactly that
Yeah.
type of game. I don't know if there is a specific category that would describe this type of game now.
Yeah.
Where it's basically like, Arc Nova is similar. It's a card digger. You're trying to dig for specific types of cards in order
Even
to meet your scoring criteria.
Earth is kind of like that a little
Earth
bit.
is like that. I think Terraforming Mars is also kind of like that. So that is the main mechanism in this game. You are digging through the deck, and the thing that's interesting is there are a ton of different species of trees and birds and animals and all sorts of just beings that are in this deck. But depending on the player count, you remove a certain number of cards. So you cannot card count, and you just don't know if what you're looking for is even going to be in the deck.
There's a large deck. They're like the really, really thick stack. So there's a ton of different cards in there. And a lot of them just basically have good synergies with other ones. And it's just about finding those combinations and making sure that you don't discard the ones that your opponent really, really needs to kind of seal their victory. So this one was tough for me. Games like this where you have to set your own end game win conditions, and you think you're doing pretty well because the math gets a little bit wonky mid game. You're like, I don't know, I think scoring 9 points on this card seems pretty good, and then we go to end game scoring and you're like, okay, I get 9 for this card, and then your opponent's like, yeah, this card gets me 21, and you're just like, man.
Do you have Fantasy Realms trauma?
Yeah, I'm super trauma. Yeah, totally. It's like, oh man, you have cards that are giving you like really big points. I thought 9 was good, something like that. So
for context, Naveen is also the person who got really angry the first time you played Wingspan.
I did.
Because he just did not have a session where you're able to find the cards that you needed.
It was just, I was constantly chasing my tail. I'm like, okay, I have this card, and I don't have the food for it. Okay, well, I'll go to the bird feeder. Wait, there's none of that food in the bird feeder, and I can't reset the bird feeder.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just go get something else, and then somebody else resets it. It's like, there's the food I need. But then it's like I have to survive 2 other turns.
Bad day.
And the food's gone. So it's like, this is not like that, obviously, because,
Because it's just the card part.
You're just the card part.
It's just the cards. So if you played Arc Nova before, it's just the card part. That's what this game is all about.
Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting is the way that you build out your forest, because of the whole part where you have to build a tree first, and then now you're choosing between the different orientations of the different cards.
Yeah, there's also like end game scoring for if you have the most of this type of tree. So I'm like, well, I have 3 of them. Monique only has 2. So I really need to keep the leg up here because I really want to score that, because in a 2-player game, especially, well, if I score that many, if I score 3 if I have the most, then that's a huge differential between the 2 of us. So there's a bunch of different ways you can score here. There's a lot more in terms of like the details of each individual card that we can kind of talk about.
Well, there are a ton of different scoring. Yeah, the game comes with like a stack of reference cards. That was the first time I'd ever seen that before, and I think I had a good laugh.
I think
when I saw it, right?
when we first were setting it up, it's like, well, do I get a reference card? It's like, no, this is just the reference.
Yeah,
like,
those are the reference cards
reference
for
cards.
every single animal and every single type of being that's in this game. So if you see them, don't get overwhelmed by them. Just put them off to the side. And basically, if you have any questions about any ways that any of these animals score, then look at the reference cards. But
I would recommend before you get into it, if you've never played it, maybe just hand like a tiny little stack of the actual cards to every player and let them just kind of just read through once they kind of understand. Because if you just go straight into it and you're just like, I'm just gonna see cards and assume that I'm gonna find it,
see how it goes, or just wing it, right? Wing it for your first game.
Don't wing it.
The first time you play, it's gonna be longer than the times after that. But also, this game requires a lot of table space because of how you're building out your forest, potentially.
Yeah, 3 or 4 players for sure. Yeah.
It's because the first time we played this game, I went with a tree strategy because I had a few cards that were like 1 point for every tree or 1 point for every bird that's on top of a tree. So I just had a huge.
I think you had the one that's like 3 points for every tree of this variety if you have the most of that variety. So it's like, get that tree.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this is a game for me that's kind of in that neutral to good. It's not one that like blew me away or anything like that, because I do struggle with these types of games. So it's fine game. How do you feel?
Oh, I liked it. I tend to like games like this though, where it's basically the card play. I raved about Fantasy Realms, which is not like this, by the way. Not a good comparison.
But in that
I
sense that like find this to get to this, and then if you put them two together.
It's just a card game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a deck of cards. This entire game was built off of this deck of cards. And I really enjoy games like that. So I think I enjoyed this one a lot more than you did. But we have not played it with more than 2 players, just so you know. So I don't know how that would impact the length of the game or the analysis paralysis. So anyway, that was Forest Shuffle, a pleasant surprise for me.
There you go. Well, there you go. Those are 5 of the games that we have been playing recently. If you have any opinions about any of the games that we just talked about, please let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to read those. Please also let us know what games you have been playing and anything that we should kind of be looking forward to playing coming up in 2024. Thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.